got to get to the end of my introduction, and then you can continue. All right. In this extra special discussion, Gillian and Andrew will study some of their favourite literary characters and explore why literature matters so much to them. What makes Miss Havisham, who Gillian played in Great Expectations, distinct from Wallis Simpson, who she brought to life in Any Human Heart? How does it feel to give physical form to words on a page? Leading the discussion this evening is Andrew O'Hagan. Andrew was born in Glasgow and grew up in Ayrshire. He has 3 times been nominated for the Booker Prize, was voted one of Granta's Best of Young British Novelists in 2003, and has won the Glenfiddich Writer of the Year Award, the Los Angeles Times Book Award, and the E.M. Forster Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He is editor-at-large of the London Review of Books and is contributor to Esquire, the New York Review of Books, and the New Yorker. He is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, I'll say it again, and has served on its governing council. I'm very pleased to pass over to Andrew now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. It's so wonderful to see all your faces tonight. It was Charles Dickens who said, "I have been in the theatrical profession all my life as a writer. My wife," he said, "is in the theatrical profession. My children are in it. My dog has been on stage since it was a puppy, and my pony, my chase pony, also goes on," he said. He took it for granted that the relationship between literature and acting was fundamental in our culture. So it's a joy to be under the auspices of the Royal Society of Literature, the most interesting, the most searching of our institutions representing literature. And to be able to talk to my mind, the most interesting actor of her generation, Gillian Anderson. Please give it up for her. She's here tonight. Now, I'm not going to waste any of our time on biography tonight. It would take me 15 minutes, at least, possibly half an hour, to go through even a summary of what Gillian has achieved as an actor. You all know her story. Born in Chicago, she's lived in London for a long time, and she has travelled the world representing this incredible panoply of characters over the course of her career. Women with strength, mystery, willpower, secret heart, and expansive motivation. I mean, I want to get right into with you, Gillian. I mean, right at the beginning of what we understand to be your career in the X-Files, you were there doing something which we hadn't quite seen before in my submission, which is to show a sidekick who wasn't a sidekick. That's to say, a female agent who didn't, as it were, show herself to be the hysterical or difficult one in that partnership, but in fact to be the rational, scientific one. David Duchovny's character was the more romantic, extraterrestrial believing, irrational character. And if you look back at the history of sci-fi television, we hadn't seen that before. Were you conscious right from the beginning that this was a female character that was quite new to television?
No.
You just found that?
No. I don't think I was conscious of anything at the time. I think that I was conscious that I was potentially going to have a job, and I wasn't even conscious that the job, were I to get the job, would tie me to something for, a very long time.
But something obviously happened over those 10, 11 seasons where, in fact, from season 9, you're the central force in the drama. Your character, Agent Scully, becomes, if you like, the central consciousness in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened earlier on. It happened during the course of the series, and certainly I would say that the creator Chris Carter had, that was part of his plan in a sense, his mastermind. But it was really. It was really the duo of them, I have to say, moving forward. The dynamic between the two of them had never really been seen before. Maybe the Thin Man films or something, sure. But there was something very unique about that as well. But her trajectory was really, as much as anything, the trajectory of me growing up in front of the camera and being completely naive. and just showing up in survival mode and trying to, you know, do what I was being asked to do on a daily basis. And anything that came above and beyond that, it was almost a gift from the writer, in that he allowed the audience to project onto her.
Yeah.
One, we'd never seen anything like her before. Two, she was unique, you know, even in and of herself. But she was also something that could be projected upon by people.
Yes. And we see it right up to the present day with Jean Milburn, is that you never allow yourself as a performer, I suggest, to become any male fantasist's, you know, version of a woman. You find the strength somehow in the character. I mean, of course, I can't suggest to you that you've always been planning to play these roles, because that's not how it works in anybody's career, not for a writer or for a performer. But there's something in your DNA, I suggest, that attracts you to women who absolutely define themselves not against male definitions of who she should be, but find something in herself, a power or a direction that comes from the character herself. I mean, the comic engine in Jean Milburn is that it's almost a reversal of what you expect a parent to be like in that situation. Yeah,
and again, I'd have to say, you know, to be fair, that was very much, it is in the writing in Sex Ed, very much Laurie's writing in terms of where Jean sits in relation to the men in her life. I would say the thing that I brought to her was actually more neurosis than was even on the page, because it was important to me that, you know, Laurie not being a woman of a certain age, that we get to see a woman who is properly, you know, struggling and having to contend with all aspects of what being a woman in her 50s, a single mother, and negotiating herself as much as she is the relationship with her kids, and trying to maintain, you know, an awakened sexual existence, and also her career. And I think that's where we get to see both her weaknesses and her strengths are in contending with herself, and both her failings and her, you know, successes in those relationships.
Did you feel that when sex education was offered to you, did you feel it was a risk for you? I mean, are you conscious that you've got a persona as an actor in the way that actors traditionally, strong actors do? We think we know who Clark Gable is. We think we know who, you know, Rita Hayworth is. In a sense, are you conscious yourself? Are you able to say that some of the roles you're accepting run counter to who?
No, I would say the only risk that I saw with Jean was for my two teenage boys. And whether having a mother who was playing a character like this was going to seriously damage them psychologically, but also, you know, damage them at school. You know, one, were it not to be successful, and then their mom would be on this creepy failing show on Netflix, you know, or if it was successful, you know, having to contend with that. And so I think that was really my only concern. I didn't get it at first. I didn't get... I have a tendency to appreciate much more subtle, ironic humour, and it was so broad that at first I thought, you know, this isn't for me, and nobody's going to like this, and so I tossed it in the bin. But I'm very glad I was convinced to pull it out, and I mean, take a risk in a sense of, you know, for all the things that I might have been afraid of, but also comedy. You know, even if one as an actor I have found, if it's not. It's very, very different acting comedy as it is drama, and it's actually.
I mean,
I find it harder, and it may just be me, and not having had that much experience of it over my career, but I find that one has to be unbelievably specific, and very often you can tell your body how to do, you can attempt to do something comedically, and very often it can just not land, it can just not work. You can be trying everything, and yet it doesn't quite, or it's not, there's something that's not. And I know that, having worked with...
Give us a clue. We'll work it out between us.
Johnny English, sorry. Rowan Atkinson.
I'm so glad you're
Having
here.
worked with Rowan Atkinson, I can say, I experience him, and I don't know whether he speaks about this, but I'll speak about it for him. But he is tortured by that specificity, well, to take after take after take, trying to, and I could very easily fall down that.
Well, he said it himself, that strange necessity for expression and restraint that exists in the comic actor, going all the way back. I mean, it's something I would suggest. I mean, you can do all the training you like, and there's a lot of technique there, but there must be something instinctive. You're quite funny in yourself, so you must be able to mine that. You seem to enjoy playing this part.
I do. I have a weird thing of being, like way too serious that it's inappropriate and too goofy for my own good. Somebody called me on it recently. I was working with an actor that I'd never worked with before, and he said, you never know what you're going to get with you. I was dumbstruck. And then I thought, he's fucking right.
Yeah.
He is. And anyway, I digress, sorry.
That's the source of it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our overture. Let me tell you how this is going to work. We're going to look at 7 characters. This evening's all about character, specifically because literature, the Royal Society of Literature is our host this evening, is often about the creation, the maintenance, the investigation of character. So it seemed to us a great idea to bring in somebody who has the experience and the magnitude of talent that Gillian has. And we're going to look at 7. We've already mentioned some of them, but we're going to look at Scully from The X-Files, Lily Bart from A House of Mirth, Stella Gibson from The Fall, Margaret Thatcher from The Crown, Feel Free to Boo, Blanche Dubois from A Streetcar Named Desire, Jean Milburn, who we've mentioned, and if of time, Eleanor Roosevelt, who Gillian has just played in a forthcoming, April, I think, TV series co-starring Viola Davis and Dakota Fanning. Now, we did start with...
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer. We've mentioned the X-Files. The thing, before moving away from that, I just want to ask you about the construction of character in that, and how important, because I know you started to direct on the show, and did you feel that, I'm just interested for a minute in this relationship between performing and directing.
Yeah.
And did you feel that directing was a way of going further with the character, or was it to do with the whole picture?
No, I've wondered about this quite a lot, which is that for some reason, while I was working, and there are certain roles that I take on where I feel like I want to get involved in the process of expanding and making it expanding. For some reason with Scully, and I wasn't involved in that, and I think I was partly. It was so clear who she was. I was being reminded all the time who she was, and I didn't get involved in that. Whereas I think David very much got involved in his trajectory and wanted to do certain things or wanted to see the character go. And I kind of left that to the writers, possibly a bit too much. And so I didn't really have that experience on that show. And so that was really everything that transpired was all them. And it wasn't until later in my career that I realized that I might have a voice and I might be able to contribute, and I might be listened to from time to time.
I mean, being listened to seems to me to be one of the driving engines. I mean, as a audience member, looking at the work. I mean, when you look at Lily Bart in A House of Mirth, I mean, an absolutely beautiful film. Still, it's dating so well. I watched it again this week. And you see, this is really it's really a look at the sexual mores of women in a world of corrupt men. That these men can make money for each other and help each other out and be an aid to each other in Wall Street. But when Lily does it, she also has to have sex with them. And if she doesn't, then, you know, I mean, it's incredibly forward-thinking and political, that film, it seems to me. There's a beautiful moment where she turns down the proposal of marriage from Mr. Rosdale. And as she turns away, you manage to do disgust on your face without a single word being said. I remember looking at that, just in terms of character, and thinking, how do you do that? How do you manage to give the inner life of a character outward expression? I mean, can you address that? I mean, even in relation to that part, tell us about the journey with that character.
Well, I do know that I have found that I cannot use real life, not direct real life stuff for internal lives of characters, and sadly and ironically, very often when I've been in the midst of playing a role, something in my life on the outside has mirrored it in one way or another simultaneously, which is really unfortunate. But it makes it then even harder to use it as a tool to get to a place or a choice. With Lily, but it's a very long time ago. I do know that I was terrified. I do know that this was the first. Well, because it was the first time. I had been a fan of Terence Davies. He was, he's quite an obscure director, and it was an art house film, and I happened to know his work and was slightly obsessed with his work, and so I was very excited to work with him and flattered to have been given the job. And I felt like I was proving I had an opportunity and a platform to prove that I could do something other than Scully.
Yeah. And,
at that point, the X-Files had become so big. And
is that a worry, Gillian, the idea that at whatever point in your career, or for any actor, especially women, I suggest to you, that they'll be pigeonholed and restricted in the roles that they're allowed to play, that a big successful TV actress is going to be stuck?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's less so now than it has been in the past. And it's also less so in the UK than it was in the US. I mean, I've spoken about this before, and it's also one of the reasons why I chose to move to the UK instead of staying in the States, was that for a very long time, actresses have been allowed to move between theatre, film and television effortlessly, and not judged for doing TV and not punished for going back to do theatre. And so I wanted a bit of that in my career. And by being here, I've been able to have that. And since then, it's also become more acceptable in the States to do, to have careers similar to that for.
And in terms of characterisation, could you just give us a minute on this question of the relationship in terms of formation of character between a performer and a director? Because there you are with Terence Davies, I mean, not only art house, but a director of great stillness and concentration, who'll let the camera linger as he does in the House of Mirth on a stream for a good few minutes.
Well, there was in Long Day Closes. I remember being in college and seeing Long Day Closes in some art house movie theatre, and he had the camera was still on a carpet, with a light reflection coming in through the window and an image, and I don't know how long that camera remained on that carpet, but I wept.
It's still on there.
Yeah. I was weeping. He really does have the ability to express emotion, transition and I think there are a few directors that do this. Andrea Arnold does this really well, and it's quite rare.
Yeah.
To be
Lynn
able
Ramsey,
to
just letting the camera sit.
Letting the camera, but also knowing where to put it.
Yeah.
I've thought about that with Andrea's work, that under another director's hand, a camera for a long time on a windowsill would make you switch the channel. But for some reason, Andrea knows the sweet spot of where to put the camera that makes you riveted, and you understand what she's saying. You're understanding transition that she's trying to invoke.
But that must be quite odd from the actor's point of view, given that you don't necessarily know.
No, and you can't trust it. And the amount of times that I thought, this director I'm working with is genius. I mean, this is amazing, amazing, amazing.
And then it's shite.
And then it's shite.
Let's have a wee look at Stella Gibson and The Fall.
Yep.
I mean, that was, to many of us, I love the whooping. It's just great. Let's talk about the writing there first, because, I mean, again, we could do an hour on this alone, where it suddenly this character arrives on screen, on the small screen in this case, who seems fully formed. She seems to have a huge hinterland, unspoken, a huge background, a depth of experience, which you brought in. You just walked in with it, it seemed to us. Now, I'm not going to ask you how you do that, although I wish I knew.
I wish I knew.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most impossible thing to get to, but what I want to know is, at the script stage, did you look at that and say, I can find her?
I mean, to me, this is a constant example of the difference between good writing and not so good writing. And I don't even know how to describe it. You know, it's really hard to put into words. I do know that when I looked at the Fall scripts, that I'd read so many scripts up until that point, where it just, you know, you as a reader, let alone as an audience member, you're force-fed characters and motivation and emotion. And his scripts, Alan Kubert's scripts, are so spare, and yet I got everything about her. I remember being on page 6 and having thought before, you know, being told this was a series, I don't want to do any more series, I'm not going to do anything, you know, and then page 6, I was in. I could have, you know, and I can't tell you, and I'd since gone on to do something else, to kind of create something myself where or maybe it was before that, but the juxtaposition of what else can be out there and his script was such a huge chasm between the two, and yet I don't know how to put it into words. I don't know how to give notes to a writer who's not getting there or who doesn't understand it or whatever, to say, you know, I end up just saying... It's as
if you understood what an actor can do.
Yeah.
He left you the space to do it.
Yeah. Yes,
you know,
but also somehow it embodies, and I've only been able to speak about it in terms of it being alchemic, that it almost felt like she was on the page in as few words as it took to have her on the page, but it was almost like but also he really works on his, you know, he'll spend a year or two, you know, manifesting in his head who this, and I think it's the same with an artist. I think it's the same with a Clemente or with a Bryce Marden, where they work on a single painting for a year, and it's, when they're done, it's one colour. It is one colour, and yet, or with Rothko, you stand in front of it and
again
you go,
and again,
oh my God, that's amazing. And yet it's what is, and it was the same with his writing.
It's undeclared depths that are just embedded, they're just there.
Yes.
There's a wonderful moment, just to home in one thing in The Fall, it's a wonderful moment where Stella does something without any explanation, without any indication. It's an expression of her inner psychology and desire. She takes an attractive young man back to her hotel room, fucks him, and then doesn't use his phone number. Men have been doing that on film for years, but women weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the amount of times in all of the press that I did for the whole 3 seasons, within the first 3 questions from a journalist, it was about that. Because
they couldn't handle it.
In 2019, or whatever it would have been, in season 3. It was remarkable.
Well,
and I found that as fascinating as anything else they wanted to talk about.
People couldn't get over it.
They couldn't get over it.
You know, this intelligent, sexy woman takes a man, has a brilliant moment of sex, and it says, right, that's you, fuck off.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really good. As far as, you know, talk about... That's how liberation works, ladies and gentlemen. We're racing on because we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
Blanche Dubois. Now, one of the things that I think I must ask you is that when it comes to character is the question of tradition. Because some roles, it's not true of Stella, it's not true of a brand newly minted character that you've made before our eyes. But what about a character who's been minted long ago and who has been played famously, as Blanche was, of course, on screen and on stage many times? What's your relationship with that? Do you ignore it in your formation of the character, or do you draw it in? I mean, this has happened to you a few times, famously, more recently, in All About Eve. I remember talking to you at the time, and you said, I'm not taking any interest in Betty Davis's performance, famous performance, as Margot Channing. You had to find it yourself. Can you just talk us through that?
Well, I mean, exactly right. And part of it is fear of some part of my brain mimicking something.
Yeah.
Or not starting from a clean slate and somehow taking on things that I don't necessarily agree with once I have then done my own work on it. And I think, you know, having worked with Benedict Andrews, who was the director of Streetcar, you know, I found working with him so rewarding and such an amazing experience for this, particularly for this play, which I'd been wanting to do for no less than 30 years. And, you know, when we got into the rehearsal space, we really, really started from scratch. And we started from scratch, and we dug such a deep hole in getting into all the different layers of Williams's text.
Can I just interrupt and ask you why you wanted for 30 years to play that particular character?
I don't know. See, I did a monologue from it for an audition, but I didn't remember that until I'd spoken in an interview about the fact that I'd always wanted to play Blanche Dubois, and my mum sent me an email and said, because you did an interview for such and such for this thing when you were a teenager, and I'd completely forgotten. And it's almost like it might be a little bit along the lines of a string theory, which is that it's already happened in a way, something that is incredibly profound in your life. And so to what degree are we moving towards that end because it already exists? Yeah. And I know I might sound a little bit mad at the minute, but and to what degree are we manifesting out of thin air? Yeah. Because it did feel, I can't tell you why. I couldn't tell.
Because it's already there. I mean, the language is there. She's there as a character.
But I already identified as a 16-year-old young lady. Yeah. I already identified with Blanche, and I knew that she lived inside me. But why?
Well, I could see it at the time, and it seemed, if you don't mind the suggestion, at some level, not in a crudely autobiographical way necessarily, but at some level intensely personal. You and I made a short film based on, it was a prequel to the play actually, which you directed.
After we did the play.
After the play. Yeah. And that piece, that film, beautiful, I think, showed a heavy investment on your part in this sort of the deep history of the character, in the brokenness, going way back, as it were, before the events in the play. You were interested in the mess, the brokenness. And it seemed to me, as I watched you direct it, and play it, of course, that there was something in it about her vulnerability which just